I'm excited to share some thoughts with you today about something that has world-changing potential, church planting. What's the big idea? All healthy, living things reproduce and multiply. And the church is a living thing. So why don't the majority of churches multiply by planting churches? I think it's because of several myths that keep us from moving forward. I want to give you a few of those myths and how I think you as a leader can overcome them. And quite honestly, overcoming most of these myths can be as simple as a mental shift in your thinking and leading. So let's jump in. What's the first myth? Number one, our church has to be a certain size to plant. What's the truth? It's not the size of the church numerically, but it's the size of the church's heart for multiplication that matters. The problem is, if size matters, then what's the magic number, right? Is it 50 people, 100 people, 5,000 people? Healthy, living organisms come in small and large packages. Ants, elephants, people, big and small, and yet they both still have the ability to multiply. Jesus only had 12, and he started a multiplication movement with just those 12. If you let a certain size goal be your determining factor for multiplication readiness, then you may actually never get there. Because let's be honest, your goal may change every time you reach it. Because typically, getting bigger usually breeds always wanting to get bigger. It can be a vicious cycle distracting you that leads you away from multiplication. So focus on the heart and the health of your church, not your size. Number two, it will destroy our growth momentum at our church. The truth? You haven't seen true momentum until you start sending out your people and planting churches. So I encourage you to ask yourself these questions. What kind of momentum are you striving for? Is it just more butts in the seats on the weekend that determines your growth momentum? Is your heart to build the biggest church in the city, or is it to church the city? Now look, I can't tell you that being a multiplying church will make your local church expression bigger on Sunday morning. But what I can tell you from experience is that every time you send some out to multiply, God will send you more. And I can definitely guarantee you that God is more concerned about building His kingdom and not our kingdom. And by planting churches, I can tell you that your growth momentum, it'll be there. It just may look different than we normally think it looks like. And guess what? It may actually expand your thinking to much bigger momentum that reaches not only your church, but throughout your city and even your world. So let me encourage you, make that mental shift and practical shift from scoring your growth momentum, not only your seating capacity, but to your sending capacity. Third myth, it's too expensive to plant a church, right? No, what's the truth? Not every church looks and costs the same. This myth typically creeps into our thinking because we're overwhelmed with the current cost of what we lead. I find leaders tend to think it's too expensive because they pastor an expensive model. And then naturally, they think they've got to plant an expensive model. When the truth is, the mental shift is to think daughter, not duplicate. You see, my daughters, at least I think, they're beautiful girls. And I can tell you that's because, thank goodness, they don't look just like me and got facial hair. That's because they're my daughter. They're not my duplicate. God already created one of me. I can tell you the world doesn't need another one of these. However, hopefully my daughters have shared DNA of her mom and I, like God dependence, faithfulness, loving others first. When multiplying churches, it doesn't have to be an expensive duplicate of your model. Instead, consider planting a daughter with similar DNA, but they look different features, and different cost. It's going to look different in your church, but that's okay. They're still your daughter. But if God still leads you to plant a church that costs a lot financially, then pray for the strength to make sacrifices necessary. Seek to link arms with others to accomplish the vision. Whether your need is great financially or not, the actual cost of souls who need to hear what the church has to say is always worth the cost. Number 4, the myth says we'll suffer because we lose our best leaders. What's the truth? Yes! Yeah, you'll lose your best leaders. I mean, I hope you don't send your worst. And thankfully, that new church will have your best and not your worst. And if you do this, take it as a compliment that you discovered and developed quality leaders that can go off on their own to lead somewhere else now. When you send your kid off to college, it's supposed to be an emotional, sure experience. But hopefully, it's an encouraging moment also that you've developed your kid into who God wants them to be, where they can now go lead out in the world. And then be encouraged that rather than suffering because you sent these people out, you might actually thrive because you gain more new leaders simply because you opened up that leadership lid because you sent your best out. So often we create those leadership lids because we do our best to try and keep those leaders we like so much. Therefore, never letting others get out of that batter's box who are waiting to get a chance to go in the game of leading. If you send your best out, then their leadership spots open up for new people to step in and keep that multiplying cycle going. And I don't call that suffering. I call that beautiful and exciting. Here's our final myth. Number 5. You gotta wait for the perfect time to plant. The truth, there's no perfect time. Life and ministry is just messy. Most young couples, you know this, say the same thing about waiting for that perfect timing to have the first baby, pay off this debt, get the perfect size house, get the minivan, right? The truth is, there's no perfect time. And I know as a parent of 3 kids, one who's about to be 18, I still don't feel ready. Parenting's messy, but it's worth it. Church planting is gonna be extremely messy at times, but working with God in this way to expand His kingdom is worth it. It's been said that if a church hasn't done something intentional within the first 3 years of existence to start a new church, it likely never will under its current leadership. It took my home church, where I grew up in the South, more than 100 years and several leaders before it intentionally did anything to plant its first church. It doesn't mean you gotta launch a church within the first 3 years of existence, but something intentional. Maybe just cast vision once a month about the dream to multiply to your people. Set aside $100 a month in a church planting fund. Remind your people this money is there for the future planter you're praying God will give you. Just don't wait. Sure, make plans. Hey, be a good help, absolutely. But realize there's never gonna be a perfect time to plant. The time is now. Let's get started. So let's wrap it up like this. My call of action to you, 3 things. Just get started, okay? Don't wait. Everybody can do something simple if the task feels overwhelming still. Here's the 3 things, but yet I think they're powerful 3. Number 1, pray. Find out the name of a church planting family. Lead your church to pray for them. Know their hurts, know their family, know their names, know their struggles, know what to celebrate. When your church attaches that family in that way for praying with them, and they see God working through them, your people will begin to gain a heart and catch a vision for multiplication. Number 2, serve. Take a group of your leaders alongside you. Serve alongside a church plant for a day, for a week. Take a little mission trip. Helping your people taste and see in person will make all the difference in the world. And it helps your church as well because it motivates them not only to multiply, but they come back home to your church, stepping out of their comfort zone, getting their hands messy in ministry, and even help grow within your church, reaching people. Finally, that third easy step, give. Give any amount, small, large, just give it on a regular basis to your church planting budget or give it to a church planting family and watch the heart of your people follow its treasures. Thank you so much. And I'm praying that you lead with the Spirit and with courage.